everyone, and welcome to the first of our 7-part Work Wellbeing at Work LinkedIn Live series, which is a partnership with the Global Wellness Institute's Workplace Wellbeing Initiative. Jen, I'm so glad that I actually got that right. There are a lot of words in that.
Yes.
So we have the most amazing guest ever to kick off the series. This is Jennifer Moss. She is an award-winning journalist. She is the author now of 3 books. Congratulations to you on that. So the first one being Unlocking Happiness in the Workplace. Correctly, did I get that correct?
Yep. Unlocking Happiness at Work. Yep, that's right.
Second one is the epidemic, the burnout epidemic. And then third, why are we here? And as you all know, we will be doing a book giveaway. This is a celebration of Jen's book, but also it is the 10-year anniversary coming up of Workplace Wellness That Works. I cannot believe it's been 10 years. So the lucky winner will be getting a copy of both of these books. So what you'll need to do is A, please share in the chat where you're coming from, and B, please share I'm in. And out of that list of people who share I'm in, we'll be doing a random drawing, and you will get 2 books that we'll send off to you at the end of this. So again, this is a partnership with the Global Wellness Institute Workplace Wellbeing Initiative. I want to extend a special thanks to Jessica Grossmeyer, to Elizabeth Backrod, and Elenit Serrano, and all of the other members of the initiative. Thank you so much for your partnership on this. Their goal is to transform workplace well-being and organizational performance, and to empower a thriving workplace. Definitely something that we're going to be able to dig into with a workplace culture expert here. Jen, I can't think of a better person to talk to than you about, really understanding what is actually happening in our workplace, and then starting to really do something meaningful to make it a place where people actually want to be. I love you talk about this idea about creating the workplace culture that everyone wants. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you, Laura. I'm so excited to be here. We've been building it up, and you're just the perfect person to host this series. So it's a good partnership.
And I also want to congratulate you for your speaking engagement tomorrow at the Harvard Business School. You have arrived. You have officially arrived.
Well, I mean, coming from a family that has all attended Harvard, and your dad playing or your grandpa playing on the Harvard hockey team, I mean, these hallowed halls. But I do have to say that there is something that happens when you step on campus. You do feel a sense of, just inspiration of post-secondary education, and how really special it is when you're in a place where lots of really smart thinkers, and being able to, hear Amy Edmondson speak this morning. Everyone knows her great work on psychological safety, and it resonates deeply with, I think, the well-being conversation.
It totally does. And we were really lucky to have her as a guest on this series. So you are in a company of amazing people in being a guest for this series. So thank you again. We have so many people coming in from all over the world, people coming from all around the United States, as well as people coming internationally, thanks to our partnership with the Global Wellness Institute Workplace Wellbeing Initiative. So I want to start first with talking about, how would you define well-being at work?
Well, it's such a, big, lofty question. And I've been sort of looking at it in a kind of an ecosystem approach. When you have really strong well-being, you have good policy. You've got, government that's actually investing in, having healthier workplaces, but there's policy to rely on. And then, in that sort of right quadrant, you have executive leadership, like at the CEO level. You have people that are modeling the behavior of self-care. They're giving permission to managers to be able to execute on making sure their employees are cared for. And then you have managers, which play a huge role in the happiness or unhappiness of employees, actually living that out. They're listening to policy that executives are also, fostering. And then us as individuals, we play a role too. We, can't come to work with learned helplessness. We want to have self-care and psychological fitness. We can't expect our workplaces to make us happy, but we can expect them not to make us, to not make us unhappy. And so I think when it comes to well-being, we focus a lot on the wellness, which is the downstream stuff, but well-being is really those upstream hygiene, taking care of people with the table stakes stuff, so that we can get to a place of neutrality to optimization. And that really is where I think on this kind of the continuum, that's where well-being lives.
And Jen, you have been speaking for so long about the importance of going upstream, particularly in relation to burnout. And one of a 2019 article of yours in Harvard Business Review, you wrote about how burnout is not about your people, it's about your workplace, and just how important it is for us to begin moving away from just the self-care remedies, understanding that we cannot yoga our way out of a toxic boss, and to really begin to address some of those upstream issues that are causing the problem in the first place. So particularly with burnout, so that organizations are actually solving for the right problem. So I am curious, since this time that you've been sounding this alarm about the importance of moving upstream for all these years, this is 6 years out just from that article. Are you seeing the needle move on that?
Unfortunately, I would say, and I like to be optimistic, but I would say that when it was a bottom line issue, when we saw all of that mobility in the pandemic, I saw a real bright spot. There was investment in well-being, but at the table stakes, kind of stuff where they were looking more at hygiene, we saw more investment in teletherapy, for example. So people, can get some prevention, can have less stigma around getting access, which is really important. But then we've seen that clawed back recently, where we're pulling away the things that actually are those fundamental parts of well-being and reduction of chronic stress and burnout, which is flexibility and autonomy and giving people that agency. There was, feeling a lack of fairness is a root cause of burnout. But when we pull back on DEI, that's increasing that sense of injustice and lack of fairness. A lot of decisions that are being made right now around policy, like return to office mandates, for example, are not following the data. And so people feel, with that lack of fairness, decisions being made that aren't actually again, following the research and the data. And so then they feel like it's arbitrary. So I see that when it's a bottom line issue, we do meet the moment. And, what I'm predicting, which is maybe giving a bit of hope to people, is that we are seeing a resistance, and employees, especially our younger cohort, are saying, I'll take less pay to have more work-life flexibility. And that means I'm going to go, or work-life harmony. I'm going to go and find a different role, a different career path. We're also seeing mature workers retiring early. And when you have 90% of them saying, I feel financially sound enough that I could retire, and we see 10,000 Americans turning 55 retirement age every day, in the next 5 years, we are, I think, going to see a bit of labor movement and some friction, and we might be able to pull some of these things back again. I just wish it wasn't necessary to have it, as a power dynamic, that we just knew the data, we understood the assignment, we know that it improves business outcomes when we have higher well-being, and people just bought into that. But whatever is the case, if it's because of these reasons, I'm just happy to see change happen.
Dan Pink once, there's a quote of his that says that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically that there is a gap between what research knows and what business does. And until business is really feeling it right here, it's often so hard, it seems, for business to be more proactive and to really follow what the research is so clearly showing, even though it will benefit their bottom line.
This is such a true statement. And I was just having this conversation with a lot of the folks that are here because there's a lot of talk about AI and how fast we need to adopt AI, and there's this expectation, this speed of acquisition of the technology. And yet, and a lot of that came out in the Microsoft Trends report, that the LinkedIn joint report. But when you actually look at sort of like in the report, the amount of AI anxiety, it's 1 in 2 workers globally that have high AI anxiety. And Gallup is finding that number, tripling for our youngest. And so, we have to realize that there's not going to be innovation or enthusiasm for adoption. We're not going to have a future ready workforce if they feel a sense of hopelessness, if they don't see themselves in the future, if they're in survival mode. So as far, we have this kind of clash between speeding up so fast and then the necessity to slow down, so that when you're looking to really optimize that technology, you have a workforce that's enabled and ready for it and curious and is eager to innovate. So we are just moving too fast and not recognizing that, moving fast and breaking things doesn't always work, especially right now when people are becoming more resistant. They're making different decisions. We have the narrowest pipeline right now for executive women that we've seen in a decade. And that's because women are opting out. There's just I think there's a lot of naivete about what's going to happen when we break this thing that is our workforce. And we're being very short-sighted about what the implications could be for, us to be competitive and future ready.
And again, back to the title of your book, when we have a tipping point, which we're really at now, effectively around so many people asking the question, why am I here? We had a comment here from Dave. If we want to share that, I'm a great example that I've chosen a nonprofit team that prioritizes flexibility, impact, autonomy, and well-being, knowing that I could be earning more in the for-profit space, and I'm grateful for that choice every day. Jen, I'm curious if you'd like to comment on that. And also to our audience, please submit your comments, submit your questions to Jen. Go ahead.
Well, I think that Dave is a great example of what we're seeing, especially, we're not like, we're missing the point on Gen Zs and millennials too, and their desire for having autonomy and purpose and feeling cared for. When you looked at the Great Resignation, 41% of the global workforce turned over, and it wasn't pay. This was the first time we didn't see pay as the number one reason. It was, my employer doesn't care about me. And so, that shock that came from facing our mortality as a collective and globally and for so long, it created a reshifting of our purpose in life. We see that there's, this urgency. It's called time discounting. So now we think we need to do things faster. But for a lot of people, it's, I need to be pro-social. I need to leave legacy. And, and a person like Dave is saying that matters as, in my life, work isn't going to be my identity. It's going to be the part that kind of harmoniously integrates into my greater expectation for being, a dad or a mom or a friend, someone that wants to be a good partner or spouse. Work is a part of that, but it's not our only identity like it used to be before.
And, I think so often about Bronnie Ware, hospice nurse who spent 15 years working with dying patients, and she heard the same dying regrets over and over and over again. One of them being, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Another heartbreaking one, I wish I had let myself be happier. And then another one being, I wish I had lived a life true to myself, not the one that others expected of me. And this really goes to your point about we realized in a 2020 kind of way, actually what matters in life.
I love that. This was a big part of kind of the foundation for the book when, I was going through promoting the burnout epidemic, and I was in a whole bunch of car rides with Uber drivers. And, I started to hear this repeating theme. And so I started to record them, and I ended up recording and interviewing over 100 Uber drivers. And what was so telling about them was there was so many people that had left these really big careers. Like one of them was Kara, who is on track to be the first female Black partner in her firm, lost very close members of her family in the pandemic, and decided, this thing that I've been working on in Costa Rica, microloans for these women, I'm going to do that instead. So I was speaking to her just before she was heading over there, and she had just been, spending her time just getting a little bit of extra money before she left. And that was what was happening across the board. Highest CEO exodus that we've seen of Fortune 500, executives ever, in that moment of the great kind of turnover. And then we saw people, even just anecdotally in my life, that had been in their job 22 years, was so loyal. And then the pandemic just switched that on, this desire to make a move. And so this is the thing that people are starting to realize is is this grind? Is this toxic environment, or this thing that I don't feel engaged in at all, or this thing that makes me feel like my work doesn't really matter? Do I want to do that if I have a short lifespan here, or I can see the finitude of my life? People just said nope and left, because they saw that those deathbed regrets. They were kind of imagining what they would feel at that moment where they had to choose. And I think that is still very ever present. We haven't lost that sense of mortality salience. And that is because we're in polycrisis. We have this reminder all the time of how intense the world is out there and how fragile it is. And so that's why people are still querying, why am I here? What's the point? And leaders need to answer that. Leaders need to make sure that employees have the answer to that, or they're going to see them leave, or worse, actively disengaged and quietly quitting, which is worse than them, leaving.
Yeah, going out of their way to get other people to join them in being actively, not just disengaged, but actively disengaged.
Yes.
Great point. So we've got a question here from Elizabeth. Hi, Jen and Laura. With 5 generations in the workforce at the moment, how do you recommend navigating policies that allow everyone to feel valued and do what matters? And I think that this really ties, Jen, to your idea about how do we create a workplace culture that works for everyone.
This is a key question because, I break the book out in these 3 parts. The first one is the foundational piece, like hope. We need to rebuild hope and purpose and community. But then the second part is solving these big business challenges. And one of them is this, generational divide, along with AI and flexibility conversations. But this is a critical question because right now we're so divided. And a lot of it has to do with each generation feeling like that they don't fit in, that they're not being seen. We see younger cohorts right now feeling like they're stepping into an environment where people are already irritated by them, that they're frustrated by them. They have sort of these bias and expectations around them being lazy and entitled. There's lots of hyperbolic headlines that you see constantly, which is so frustrating. Millennials would just be able to afford a home if they stopped buying avocado toast. It's like it's hilarious and it's terrible. It's so rude, and it's just diminishing an entire generation of very hardworking people. And we also have the flip side where we're not showing that deference and respect for people that are mature workers. One of the data points that I thought was so interesting was when you interview, and there was a large study done of 55 people that were early retiring by choice. And when you looked at what reasons were why they were leaving, 40% of them said that they would have stayed if they had been trained on the technology and AI that was starting to become part of, their day-to-day experience, but they were being overlooked. You can't learn AI, so there's bias there. And we found that a lot of continuing education around that topic is not being delivered to certain groups. And then we see younger cohorts. When you look at 1 in 3 have 0 wage or very like below threshold wages, they're putting off family planning. They're making choices to live longer with their parents because they can't really afford it. 1 in 4 Gen Zs are actually responsible for the primary caregiving
Wow.
for their siblings or a parent. So there's a lot that we don't know about each other. And also 1 in 4 grandparents are primary caregivers of their grandchildren. So we need life stages, benefits, and approaches, but not just thinking that life stages is at one point in time. That we need to understand that people go through different, valleys, and they go through different experiences. But across the data that I found in every generation, we actually all want the same thing. It's a very marginal difference in the data around flexibility. It's a very marginal difference around well-being benefits and mental health benefits and feeling like we have psychological and physical safety at work. It's not just a Gen Z thing that's amplified through TikTok. This is across generations. So we need to do a better job of seeing where we're similar and creating narratives that don't have bias, and removing some of the language of labeling so that we can recognize that we're all sort of in this together.
And I think one commonality also is the need to feel like we matter, which ties, of course, to our guests that we have in August. Zach Mercurio will be talking about the power of mattering. So really quickly, I wanted to, Alana, if you can put up the comment from Jacqueline, or come on here. How can leaders foster a sense of community and engagement among employees who feel detached or disengaged from their work?
This is a great question, and sort of to the question too around generational divides. How do we create that engagement with people and bring them back? So much of it is what I've come to in the research that I think is a great term is optimal distinctiveness. People want to stand out and fit in at the same time, and we all want that at the same time. When we're creating belonging, it's really about understanding how our values, sort of our terminal goals, connect to the organization's mission. And so often, and you look at the purpose gap, 85% of executives are feeling a sense of purpose pretty regularly on the job, where only 15% of the frontline people are feeling purpose on the job. So there's this purpose gap. And a big part of it is that at the highest executive level, you are connected to that mission. It usually has been that you've been there for a while, you're really engaged in it, you have a lot of autonomy and agency, so you can sort of enjoy the benefits of that tenure. Whereas, people that are maybe just onboarding, starting out in the first few years of their job, or they're on the front lines, they care more about just the day-to-day values, like the things they care about. If they really care about climate change, then you want to make sure as a manager that you know that, and you make those connections to what your company is either doing, or if there's an employee resource group, or making it so that like the day-to-day tasks feel like they have meaning. And what I loved about my conversations with Uber drivers is that I would say 90% of them said that they hate driving, which, is hilarious because that's what they do all day long. But for them, they didn't even think about that. It was talking to people and getting to know people. They really love that about the job. They're a social person. They love the flexibility. So it was the ancillary parts of that compensation that mattered to them. A lot of them, it was pay, and pay can be purpose, because for them, it was putting their kids in better schools or living in better neighborhoods. We need to attach not the thing that you're doing as somehow having to be connected to the mission. It's about seeing what matters and what people care about, and what they're truly inspired by. And we do that with this very easy way to do this. Every single week, have a non-work related check-in. Start with it being fun, because right now going to work is like going to school without art gym or recess. There's just like the fun has left the building. It's not cool anymore. You want to start with something fun, and then ask what lights people up, what gets people excited. We used to ask around the team kind of what made you smile today. And then it was what stresses you out. As a manager, you can then find out if there's some stressors that you have a benefit for, or you can, be a conduit to what is in your EAPs. And then this is the most important. What can we do for each other to make next week easier? Simple ways of building hope. You're solving small problems and seeing sort of incremental change, and you're doing this as a team cohesively. And those three things can be what you find out about what people are driven by, what they get excited about. You're building altruism, which is a well-being, benefit or well-being program that works. And it's 20 minutes or less that can change culture. It's just about incremental, intentional change over time.
I often talk to managers about the importance of really shifting from this idea of self-care to team care. And there are so many of these kinds of simple rituals that managers can implement to really start to change in a small but important way the work gets done, so that well-being is infused into their leadership style, and it's also infused into the daily team practices. So I want to be sure that we get some of these comments up here. We're coming up toward the end of our session. I cannot believe it. Why don't we hear from Suzanne here? There is a definite age bias, assuming Gen Xers can't learn technology and that they are able to bail or want to retire. Many still plan on being in the workforce for a number of years and are very tech savvy and fast learners. Organizations are missing out on leveraging these people who have typically a broad range of skills. Agree so much. These folks also want flexibility, agency, and purpose as much as Gen Z.
This is such an important comment because I have this slide that I always share it. And so there's two that get a lot of attention. One of them is Gen Xers, the silent generation. They're being leapfrogged by millennials for promotions by 20 to 30%. Wow. And a lot of it is that they are just sort of expected that they're not going to complain about it and they're not as vocal about those things. But that's also something that we need to be celebrating as leaders. We need to identify that is not that they're not speaking up, but more just that they're trying to be amenable and they're flexible. And that's something really awesome about Gen Xers. And then also at the same time, when you look at the U curve of happiness, I mean, the Xers fit right into the trough of despair, of unhappiness in their lives. 46% are sandwiched. I mean, they are in a very difficult emotional, mental time. And there's lots of changes for women as they go through, lots of biological changes. So I think we need to do a better job of meeting the silent generation where they're at and bringing them in and making it feel like they can ask for what they need, but we can be proactive in giving them what they need before they have to demand it.
So I want to be sure that we do our draw here for why are we here? Whoops, right way. Along with Workplace Wellness That Works. So could we, drum roll, announce who the winner is?
So excited.
So, and today's winner is Elizabeth Fadell. We'll follow up with you via LinkedIn message, so keep an eye out. So, Elizabeth, congratulations. You will be receiving both books. And again, we're going to be doing this book giveaway for every one of our sessions over this 7-part series. Jen, you were an amazing kickoff to our 7-part series around well-being at work. I want to again thank the Global Wellness Institute Workplace Wellbeing Initiative, along with Jen. Thank you so much for being our guest. I am wondering two things. Can you give us, in 30 seconds or less, top 3 takeaways for our listeners?
Follow the data. Make sure that you are practicing altruism because it'll make us nicer. Go buy someone coffee in that lineup and do nice things for each other. And then I would also say, just give yourself grace. This is a very strange time. We're in a lot of uncertainty and no one actually knows what they're doing yet. So, no one knows what they're doing.
I'm not the only one.
So if you feel that way, you're not alone. So give yourself some grace on that.
So data, altruism, and grace. Great 3 takeaways. And Jen, how can we follow your work? How do we buy your book?
You can go to the website, jennifer-moss.com. Super easy. There's lots of stuff there. There's blogs and HBR articles that I've written and some of that other stuff. So yeah, go visit there.
And there's also a page to buy your book. So I'm assuming that's jennifer-moss.com/book. where you can, and there it is. Thank you so
Great.
much for that, Alana. So want to thank everyone for joining us for an incredible conversation today. Our next guest will be Simone Stolzoff, who is the author of The Good Enough Job, which really touches on some of the themes that we spoke about today. He will be joining us on July 23rd at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So hopefully that timing works a little bit better for some of our people coming in internationally. Jen, again, I cannot thank you enough for being our guest. Congratulations for all of the amazing work that you're doing and for the extent to which you are advancing our workplace. We need you more than ever. And for all the people who are boots on the ground doing the hard work and actually making our workplace a better place, thank you so much for the work that you do. Again, a big thank you to GWI Workplace Wellbeing Initiative. We will look forward to seeing all of you in a month, July 23rd at 9 a.m. And again, Jen, thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. This was excellent. Went too fast.
Always.
Always.
Bye, everyone. Thanks again. See you in a month.